Hi everyone and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session. Today we're joined by Louisa Peters, who is lecturing psychology at the University of Leeds, and also joined by Doll, who is the artist and creative producer for the project that they're going to be talking about. Today's Lunch and Learn theme is creative dissemination of research. If you could all make sure your microphones are on mute if they're not, just so there's no background noise or anything. I will be keeping an eye on the chat as we go along, and we'll run a question and answer session at the end. All these sessions are recorded and they will be added to our YouTube channel by the end of the week, and we will send that link out to you. So I will now hand over to Louisa and Doll.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll have some lovely visuals to go alongside. So I don't know if you want to start introducing yourself, Louisa, whilst I do that. It's up to you, but I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah, so I'm Louisa Peters. Just thought I'd correct that I work at Leeds Trinity University. So Leeds sounds better, maybe, I think. But yeah, I work at Leeds Trinity University in the psychology department, and I work as a lecturer and a researcher there. And my sort of topic area is health psychology, in particular mental health. So I'll let Doll introduce themselves.
Yeah, sorry, I'm flicking between screens, so if there's a delay, that's why. So I'm just going to make sure that this is where it needs to be. That's too far. Behave. Okay. Technology never wants to behave, does it? There we go. That's what I wanted. So let me pause that for a second. Every single time I try and do something, it pops away my Zoom screen. There we go. So yeah, just call me Doll. It's easier. So I'm an artist, expert by experience and creative producer. And I helped facilitate, led on the animation side of the project. And I guess it's a lot easier to talk about as we move through with the actual animations on the screen. But so I was kind of, I guess, the practical art side of Louisa's research. So, but yeah, I am an artist. I lived experience, and I'm non-binary and use they them. And I'm very open about my experiences, but I do encourage everyone to be safe and know that if you need to tap out at any time, you absolutely can do, because some of the themes do stray into personal experience. So, but there isn't anything overtly triggering. I just want everyone to know that that's to be safe, basically. I'm going to mute and carry on with the presentation.
Yeah, so I think, yeah. Oh yes, we're just going to talk about what the Reconnect project was. So this project stemmed from my research, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. But I wanted to create a way to disseminate my research findings in a more creative way, in an accessible way, and to start conversations beyond the page about mental distress and ways to live well. And this was particularly inspired by the interviews I had during my research. And I really wanted to give people the justice and the voice of their lived experience. So my research was conducted in 2021 to 2023. So it was over 2 years I did data collection, and this was part of my PhD. And my research question was how, why, and in what context did community arts enable the identity change recovery process from serious mental illness? There was a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack there, which maybe we'll unpack a bit as we go along through the animations. But just to give you a bit of context, the data I collected, I did, the standard literature review on the topic. I also conducted 26 longitudinal interviews. These were what I call art solicitation interviews, because people brought their artwork, some of which you can see on screen here, to those interviews to talk about their experiences. And I also used the Recovering Quality of Life questionnaire, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is a questionnaire that's used by clinicians to kind of look at personal recovery processes. So that's kind of the research, and I'm not going to talk about the findings because that's kind of where the animations came in. So I can't remember what our next slide is before I carry on talking. Oh yeah. So I might hand over to Doll at this point just to explain kind of the animation course and how that sort of worked and came about.
The best lay plans, apologies. So I'm trying to move it around and not get too far ahead. So I'm just going to let this play in the background and catch up. So essentially, as Louisa said, there was here we go. That's the bit I want. There was the consultation with experts by experience. And from that, there was a project that came up around animation. And there's something really important about art and mental health and the interplay between the two and its power to voice, heal, move through things. So the animation project was 10 weeks, delivered online. The people that signed up, we were looking for people who had their own personal experience of mental distress is the term that we prefer to use. And however they identified, that was up to them. There was nothing leading or prying. It was very much them on their own journey. And the 10 weeks, we met up and had a really lovely group. And the aim of it was to teach them by the end of it how to create an animation. So none of them had done animation before. And the idea was to empower them to look at the word reconnect and what that meant to them and create an animation. There was no caveats or limitations put on them. It was very much as little as they wanted to do. It was more about getting people in that space and giving them some tools that they might want to use in the future. And also really, really putting out there the power of creative dissemination. So taking something from a report and a lot of text that only a very select few people will get eyes on, and making it palatable and accessible, and more importantly, engaging to a much wider audience. So
yeah, I'm just going to chime in there and say that the reason the project's called Reconnect, and hopefully you'll see in the animations to come, as this was one of the key findings, was this idea that community arts help people to really reconnect back to themselves, to something they feel like they might have lost because you can become very overwhelmed with illness, to connect with others, to connect with community. So, and it's not just connection, it is that kind of regaining and rediscovering. Even though there was a lot of new discovery and new connection and things in there, I just found that was quite enlightening in the findings of the research, and hopefully you'll see that as you go along. And importantly, these animations were toured around the north of England to the communities that were involved in the research as well. So it was also a way of giving back and thanking people and telling people about, you know, what their stories and where their voices have gone as well. And that's why we're bringing it to you today as well, to share this with this community as well, because that's really important. But we're going to launch into, you're going to watch some of the animations today, and we'll talk about what they're about and how they link to the research as well. So I'll let Doll do the first one.
So yeah, we're going to start. So we've got them kind of grouped together. So just to kind of make everyone aware for access reasons, they are non-verbal, so there might be music, but there is some wording, but it's of a size that it should be okay. If anyone has any issues and would like a different format or transcripts afterwards, if you could just let the host know, and we can absolutely get that for you. There are ways to find this after the event, which we will send links out for, and they are quite short. So if you feel like you might be visually or sensorily overwhelmed, the maximum length of one of them, and that's at the very end, is 7 minutes. So we try to be quite mindful of everyone's different needs, including ours, because it can be quite a lot sometimes, and that will become evident as we move through. So all of the pieces are anonymous, with the exception of the first one, because the first one was almost done as a demonstration of proof of concept from beginning to end, and I'll explain more at the end of it. But yeah, so I've turned the sound up. You don't have to have it on to get the effect, but the music's kind of cool, so it's up to you. Okay. So that was my animation. It was made to show the participants the process. So we have a website which we can direct people to, which has a lot more resources on it. But part of that will be the storyboarding process, which was really key in showing people how to break down thoughts and brainstorming, and much like many of you do when approaching research, is kind of like trying to get the building blocks of where you want to go. That's the storyboarding, is that for animation. And so I went on the journey with them so they could see what could be achieved. And it's quite poignant that I'm showing this to you guys today, because it's 2 days after quite an important day in my life. And yeah, I cannot speak highly enough of the project and the outcomes and how well everybody did. And I'm so proud of them all, because they all did something totally different, not only in tone, but in style. So I'll just see if Louisa wants to come in there. But then as we move through, you'll see that everyone's approach is different, but equally brilliant.
Yeah, what was great about the project is I didn't come in and say, here's my thesis. This is what I needed to represent. Because it was these animations were reflecting people's stories, which reflected what I found in my research. And Doll's, whilst they made it about their experiences and to show the participants how it can be done, I thought it was a great example of how creative practice provides really personalized coping strategies. And I use creativity as such a broad term, and it's very empowering because people can choose what they need, basically. And I think this comes up as a common theme throughout all the animations, and you can imagine. But another thing we're going to see in there's sort of a 3, isn't there, next in a little group. So we're going to watch one called, is it Little Red Boots? And that one is, for me, their animation, this person's animation was very much about reflecting back to childhood memories. And for me, this resonated with when people used creativity and art to connect with a positive memory, to connect with something again they felt they'd lost, and they were able to reconnect with that through an artistic practice. But equally, this artist did another short one called Shadows, and it was, this one was kind of going the other way and thinking back to kind of the darker side of imagination, particularly as a child. So it's kind of looking at that kind of idea of memory and processing difficult emotions in this one. And then the last one, Acorn, kind of speaks for itself. I'm not really going to say anything about Acorn. We'll come back to that once we've seen it. But yeah, if Joe doesn't have anything else, then we could probably let them roll. I think acorns kind of speaks for themselves, but the artist said that that animation was about the process of slowly beginning to recreate a sense of self and learning to live with illness. And I think that was a big finding in the research, that creative communities and charitable organisations and these sort of community spaces allow for, in theoretical terms, transformative learning, which is an adult learning process, and very much related to identity and sense of self, and it kind of stems from a learning to come out of oppression as well. So there's, I think, acorns very much kind of reflects that process. Doll, I don't know if you want to say anything on the animation.
I just think that what it does is really highlight the different approaches, and we went into this with no set idea of what the outcome would be. It was very much led by the participants. And I guess the thing, looking back and reflecting as I am wrapping up my own research project, which is very much aligned with this, is this concept of if a picture paints 1,000 words. And it's kind of like this idea of like how much more succinctly can we distill this massive academical task into these accessible, engaging, human, real world products, I guess. So creative dissemination, I think, has a huge amount of power and should be embraced more, because it's a much needed bridge between the two worlds, especially in forums like mental health. And I think there's a tendency to not want to challenge or ask of people who are going through stuff like this, but actually 9 times out of 10 they will surprise you, and it can be transformative to move through the difficult. So I just kind of would like you all to hold that in mind as you're viewing these, because these people who were on this course were candid and brave and, in my opinion, trailblazing and gave so generously.
Yeah, I think they came into the project knowing that this was a creative dissemination project. So this wasn't a community arts for mental health project, which is what I looked at in my research. I was very upfront about that, that this is what I found, and I want to share these ideas with people, and you're the best people to kind of tell these stories. So that we were upfront with the purpose of it, but in doing so, we also had those experiences that reflected the sort of creative communities that I was researching. And I was thinking about both the artists in those animations both went through a very transformative process, like unanticipated. We didn't set out to to provide that for people, but I think the person that made Acorn found that really difficult to do, but they loved it, and it was cathartic, and it moved them a bit forward, in their journey. And again, this was an important finding in all of the in the research as well, was that none of this was easy, and that difficulty and challenge should really be acknowledged as a recovery process in of itself, because you can't move forward without having to sort of come through something, and even just turning up is a challenge to overcome for some people. So yeah, I thought that was quite a nice link in those animations, I think we'll move on to the next one called Little Dog now, which for me, when I watch it, I think you can read so much out of it. For me, I really resonated with this idea of the journey of recovery and those difficulties, it being up and down. But there's a lot in there. I almost don't want to say any more, and maybe just let it roll. It's a lovely animation, this one. Doll, I don't know if you want to comment on that one beyond what I've said.
I think so. I love all of them, but there's something particularly striking for me about that one, and I almost don't want to lead anyone's interpretation of it. I think that's the beautiful thing about these pieces and art in general is that there's a way of being really open and vulnerable in a way that feels safe. I think that's massively important, especially when we're dealing with, quite big topics. And I am also very wary of using them as a diagnostic tool, because it's something that I reject wholeheartedly. This is a process, it's a step, and it's part of a huge plethora of things that people should be more encouraged to engage with. And that's, you know, academics, practitioners, clinicians, person on the street. We should all be doing this as part of our own life, well-being, whatever word you want to kind of level at it, or whatever's trendy this week. The bottom line is sometimes we have to unpack, and having lots of tools to do that is important. And I say this very often when I'm facilitating in other roles. You can have the best idea in the world. It doesn't mean anything if no one hears you. And that's what creative dissemination is to me. It's about, I found this amazing thing. Who can I tell? Okay, cool. I found this amazing thing, but it's you know, 1,000 words in a textbook on a shelf in a university. But who it really needs to reach is the struggling single mum that is in social housing, that doesn't get to go out and talk to anyone. So I don't know if there's anything you want to come into before we move through to the next few.
Yeah, I'll just I suppose the last point, I suppose, before we watch the last two is, as Doll said, looking at the animations as well, of how varied they are in their style, but also, as we've talked about, the meanings that the artist had or I've drawn from them as well are also varied. And this I just sort of wanted to reflect on that. This is one of the reasons why creative communities were found to be so powerful. When I was asking that question, how and why, it's because it creates, through a variety of factors being in place, it creates opportunities for people to engage in a way that works for them. So it's very much person-centered care, as we'd like it to be. And then also, you know, these, as we've seen, we've had learning coping strategies, we've had processing difficult emotions, we've had reconnecting with memory, we've had overcoming challenges, we've had discovery, we've had creativity. Not everyone uses all of this, but the point is that these community spaces provide a lot, and then when you add a creative activity, it opens it up even more for people to engage in processes that they need and they work for them. So that's why I think they're so unique, and I think, and that's the argument I make in my research as to why they work. There's a blog post, I think, on the NIHR that's got some more like academic stuff behind it, to support that kind of idea. But I think it's also reflected in all these animations about, all, you know, without prompting, this is what people are saying. And the last two animations are more about the journeys, again, the ups and downs. It's the journey, not the destination, kind of, especially in the first one, Dawn Till Dusk, or Dusk Till Dawn, or whatever it's called, I've forgotten. That's bad. But you know, it's very much about those journeys and the ups and downs of it and the process. So I think, yeah, we'll play those two for you now.
Yeah, so we're going to play the final two. I'm just keeping an eye on time because I'm aware that we have a very finite window with you, and it is such a broad topic. So the final two are going to play, and then we'll move straight into handing back to Nicola for questions, just so we make sure that everyone has space to kind of feedback. But we will make sure that you can access these things beyond the sessions. And I know Louisa and I would welcome any thoughts, questions, you know, pontifications and musings on creative dissemination and how it can be implemented. So I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of observed. But so these two will play. So the final one is quite a bit longer than a lot of the others, and I think it would be really nice to have that clean space at the end and let it just sit for itself. So.
Just letting that settle.
I'm just going to stop sharing screen so that I come back and we can kind of be in the room. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of just let that one sit. And I'm just going to hand back to Nicola.
Right, fab. Thank you for that, both of you. Some really powerful, moving animations there, and I know that's kind of reflected in the chat as well. Has anybody got any questions for either Louisa or Doll on this subject? Yeah, Kate?
Not a question, more of a, I think they're just absolutely sensational. They're such amazing, moving things to watch, you know, and I'm just really impressed with the work that everyone's done on it. The only thing I did wonder is how you chose the music, because it seemed to go really well as well with the mood. So
I think, well, for the last one, that was I worked with the artist on that one, and I'm a bit of a Debussy fan, so I was like, you know, what'll be great, a bit of Debussy. But yeah, I think the Dusk Till Dawn was actually somebody playing to the animation, and that was recorded, so they were playing along to it as they were watching. What about the other ones, Doll? Do you know about the other music?
So the other pieces, the music was chosen by the artist from a collection of like royalty-free music that we had, but it happened naturally that everyone went with music rather than a narrative, and I think that is a point that gets lost quite a lot when it comes to a specific genre of creativity called graphic medicine, which is the power of breaking down boundaries by removing language and cultural iconography and kind of making it a lot more it's not, as you can see, it's not even simplistic. It's just breaking it down into what we identify collectively as humans and putting that out there. And then people can take from it what they wish, which makes it much safer.
We've got a question from Liz in the chat as well, who first of all says, fantastic set of animations, very powerful and inspirational. Thank you for sharing with us. What an amazing project. But I'd be interested to hear a bit more about the storyboard process and what did it involve.
So the whole 10-week course we taught online for like a couple of hour session once a week. And there's a complete course guide that goes with it, and so each week we kind of took one area and kind of walked people through. So storyboarding, the process that I teach with storyboarding is to take a common activity and the idea of breaking it down. So the one that I use as an example is toast, and I ask everyone to go away in the week between and document in 6 and 12 images how to make toast. Because what that does, and this will be, I think, as researchers, you'll really understand this, is although you say to someone make toast, everyone will make it differently. So some people go away and they go, oh, you just put the bread in the toaster. I'm like, but is that all you do? And it's about really thinking about the processes that we're engaging in and how we communicate them to each other. So some people went as far as like, oh, and I select, the butter and the jam, or I put Marmite on, or I put mine under the grill, or I slice my bread, or it doesn't. So there's all these little finite like journeys that can spring off of this one incredibly simple and universal concept. So that's what we bring storyboarding. And as a facilitator that has my own experience of living with mental illness and wanting to platform people's own experience and voice, what I try to do is embed some kind of theory in it. So beyond the animation project, what they've learned there, unwillingly, unwittingly, but in a good way, is to take a problem and to break it down into sections, because then those sections are manageable. And then also between the 6 and the 12, the idea is, what can I edit and still have the same process? What do I need to add in to make the process richer? I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, quite blown away by that. That's such an amazing way of teaching it and describing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not much
it's
more to say.
why
I was
I'm
like,
so
wow.
passionate. It's why I'm so
Yeah.
passionate about creative dissemination. I've come into research as an artist and fallen in love with creative research through my own other projects, and I just think it's so powerful, and this completely just proves it.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots more comments coming in the chat as well. Just saying thank you, beautiful, moving, powerful. Again, do we have anybody else for any more questions? No? Well, thank you both, Louisa and Doll, for today's session. Louisa has put her email address in the chat. If anybody does think of any questions at a later date or anything, do feel free to get in touch. As I said earlier, this has been recorded and it will be going on the YouTube channel later this week. So if you want to go back and watch anything again, it'll be available there, and the Reconnect website is there in the chat as well. Yeah, so if nobody's got any more, then thank you both, and we will see you all later.